Hello friends, come check out some of my favorite reads here on Pages in Chaos. So first of all, I just want to say a huge thank you to everybody in the last week that has subscribed and liked and commented on my very first video. It means so much to me, and it just amazes me how wonderful this booktube community is. So seriously, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much. So many of you in my last video said that you would love to see some of my favorite reads of all time, some that I read when I was a child, some that I have read more recently. So I have compiled a list here of just a few of my favorite reads in the genres that I enjoy most. So growing up, my parents instilled a love for reading in me. My mother and father, both when I was a child, read to me before bedtime, read to me throughout my life. And I just, from a very young age, fell in love with stories and books and reading. I enjoyed books like the Berenstain Bears and the Little Golden Books, especially Pokey Little Puppy. That was one of my favorites. And from Dr. Seuss, Are You My Mother? And these stories were just stories that stuck with me throughout my childhood. When I learned to read, I started reading those chapter books. One of my favorites was Amelia Bedelia. I absolutely loved this character. She was hysterical, and I just always wanted to see what she was up to next. Of course, as I got older, I started to read books that introduced me to some of the genres that I enjoy today as an adult. For example, Goosebumps. This was my introduction to mystery and thriller and some horror stories. I absolutely loved Goosebumps. And the Babysitters Club, that was also an enjoyable series that I loved. I went to my mother's the other day and I wanted to see if she still had the books because I know that I would have taken them with me if I still had them at my parents' house. And unfortunately, we looked and we couldn't find them. So what we think happened was they were destroyed in a flood that we had about 20 years ago. My parents were putting a second story on the roof. So we had the tarps and we were still living in the house. And unfortunately, there was some freak storm. It only lasted about an hour and we lost a lot of things to that flood. And I really think that my Babysitters Clubs and my Goosebumps books were a part of that. So I hopefully would like to try to recapture some of those books in the series. I've been looking on things like Pango and Thrift Books and Etsy to see if I can find some of those. Another book that I also enjoyed was the books by Laura Ingalls Wilder that she wrote, the Little House books, The Little House in the Big Woods and Farmer Boy and all of those books in the series. I really enjoyed these as a kid. I also enjoyed watching the TV show with my mom as a child as well. Next up, we have Loves Music, Loves to Dance by Mary Higgins Clark, the Queen of Suspense. This book got me back into reading when I had to choose from a list for a summer assignment going into my freshman year of high school. And then this teacher had a whole bunch of books that were just, you wouldn't expect to see on a reading assignment. So this one I picked. I love this one. And this actually was my introduction not only to adult mystery, but one of my favorite authors of all time. I love Mary Higgins Clark. I have pretty much every single one of her books. I might be missing one of her two of her more recent ones. And I've still yet to pick up the one that was published right after she passed that she was working on before she died. Now, that same teacher in senior year also had a bunch of books that were not your typical books that you would expect to read in high school. And she introduced me to my favorite book ever, The Little Prince. I absolutely love this book. I have read this book so many times over and over, and I will continue to read this book. The illustrations are just beautiful. This was a book that was written in French and translated. So it is a fable about this pilot who's stranded on this little planet, and he meets this little prince who is on a discovery to find the reasons for life, right? The secret to life and the secret to enjoying a good life. And this is my copy, look at that, from high school. So every time I read it, I enjoy just looking at my notes and, you know, reading my little margin notes in here. And on the very first page, there is an image and it talks about imagination. So my margin note is imagination, the difference between a way a grown-up sees things and a child. And if you could see, right, there's this drawing here, and this drawing to an adult might look like a hat, right? It's brown, it's got a brim, but as a child with imagination, you're gonna see something like this maybe, right? And to you and your imagination as a child, it would be a snake who has eaten an elephant whole. And that's I always loved that part in the first 2 pages of the book. So I know I'm spending a lot of time on the little prints, but that is because this is my favorite book of all time. Next up is the series that I am absolutely in love with. All of my students know that this is my go-to series, and that is the Harry Potter series. And, you know, I have things in my classroom. A former student of mine bought me a little gift that has my name on it, and it's a Harry Potter plate. So Harry Potter is one of my favorite series of all time. And if I could only pick one book from the series to reread over and over, and it was just that book, it would be the 3rd book in the series, The Prisoner of Azkaban. So I grew up with this in high school. The first book came out when I was in middle school, and the rest of them came out while I was in high school. So this was a book that took me through most of my high school years. Another book that I really, really enjoyed was The Hunger Games. I so loved this series. This came out when I was already in college. So I read this series in college, and I love this series. I love the movies too, even though the movies have a lot missing from the books. But The Hunger Games is about a post-apocalyptic world. And in the United States, the states have been separated into districts, 12 districts. And there was a rebellion against the government. And now, to serve as a lesson and a warning to never do it again, each year, the districts have to offer up 2 children as tributes to fight to pretty much the death in these Hunger Games. So I love this series. I'm actually planning on doing a reread of this series so that I can read the prequel, which I have not read yet, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, which is Snow's story. Then I'll probably watch that movie, and hopefully I will be able to read this just in time for the release of Haymitch's book, which is coming out in 2025 and all about Haymitch's Hunger Games. So I'm extremely excited about that. So next up on my list is some books that I have read in more recent years and some of my favorites from my genres that I enjoy. I kind of separated them into certain genres just because, again, it's hard to pick just one or two. So I did the best that I can. And first up are some middle grade books. Every year I participate in a readathon called Middle Grade March, and I have found so many different stories and books that I have enjoyed reading and discovering thanks to all the people that participate in Middle Grade March. And it was really hard to pick just a few. So I've picked 2. And actually this first one is not necessarily a book recommendation, but an author recommendation. So first up, I have Katherine Applegate. I have read 3 books by her. This was the first book, Otter, that I read by her. And so far, I have given 5 stars to every single book that I have read by her. This book, Otter, was written in verse, and it's got, again, cute little illustrations. And it's about Otter, this little baby otter, who is being rehabilitated in the aquarium in California because something happens to her out in the wild. She comes in contact with this great white shark, so now she has to be rehabilitated. And this is where she talks about her story and, you know, what it's like to meet the other otters in the aquarium. And this is just the most adorable book ever. I mean, look at that little otter on the cover. I will recommend anything so far by Katherine Applegate. I've read The Wish Tree by her as well. And I've also read Crenshaw, which is about this boy and his imaginary friend who's a cat named Crenshaw. And as he gets older, he's wondering why he still has Crenshaw appear to him. It was just a lovely book. So I definitely recommend anything by Katherine Applegate. The next middle grade book I actually just read this last middle grade March, and that is Amari and the Night Brothers. And I cannot wait to continue with this series. So Amari and the Night Brothers is about this girl who, despite what the police say and what her mom says about her brother being missing and just not necessarily able to be found, she's convinced that he is still out there. And then she actually gets an invitation to this magical school. She finds out she has magic powers. Now, this broke my heart in some scenes because Amari is actually bullied for a lot of different reasons. The school that she goes to, she doesn't fit in with everybody else. She's there on a scholarship, so she feels out of place. And then she goes to this magic school where she thinks she's going to have a better go at it. And because of the type of magic that she has, it is considered a very dangerous type of magic. And so she is bullied, and a lot of the kids just don't make friends with her. There was just one scene in this book that I almost cried. It just completely broke me. But I absolutely loved Amari and the Night Brothers, and I can't wait to pick up the second and third books in the series. So the next couple of recommendations I have are the fantasy genre. So first up, I have the Remnant Chronicles. So The Kiss of Deception is the first book in this series, and each book got better. The last book was probably my absolute favorite. The Remnant Chronicles, in my opinion, is the most underrated fantasy book that I have seen and discovered so far. So the Remnant Chronicles trilogy, it starts off with this girl who is supposed to marry this prince and make an alliance with this neighboring kingdom. And she winds up not going through with it, and she runs away. And she and her lady's maid go into hiding. And while in hiding, she comes across two men. One of them is an assassin that was sent to kill her. The other one turns out to be the prince that she was supposed to marry, and he sets off to go find her after being stood up on the day of the wedding. The magic system in here isn't so straightforward. Her abilities were very subtle until later on in the books. In fact, in the first books, they weren't even really there. There were mentions of it, but it doesn't start becoming more of a big deal until the later books. And I just really enjoyed it because it was a little bit different. And I absolutely enjoyed the first book because the thing that was great about this first book is you don't know who is the assassin and who is the prince until the end of the book, pretty much. And I thought that was just great. I actually was confused the first time that I actually read it through and I found out who is who because I was listening to it on audio, and sometimes I have problems processing audiobooks. So I actually got confused and I thought I missed something, but I didn't. It just turns out that Mary E. Pearson did a great job with that first book. So I highly recommend The Kiss of Deception and the entire Remnant Chronicles series. Next up is the Acatar series. So A Court in Thorn and Roses is the first book in the series by Sarah J. Maas. I enjoyed that book. It's a Beauty and the Beast retelling about Feyre who kills a wolf. She's a hunter. She kills a wolf, and it turns out that this wolf was not a wolf at all. It was actually a shape-shifting fae. And to serve her punishment, she gets taken back to the Fae world where she has to live out her life with the Fae that she has to serve as punishment for killing this Fae that was part of that world. The favorite book in the series of mine, though, is the second book in the series, and that is Acatar, or A Court of Mist and Fury. Loved this book. I loved the banter in this book. I loved the slow burn in this book. It was great. I read these books, I devoured them during lockdown in 2020. These are the original covers. You can't get these covers anymore. It's part of the reason why I haven't bought the most recent book, A Court of Silver Flames, because the cover doesn't match. I'm going to buy it eventually, but the cover doesn't match. I love this book. I devoured the series, all the books that were out when I bought them, devoured them during that entire time. And I loved that I read them before they got really, really big. Like, they just started coming out on social media as being really good and popular books. So I definitely recommend the series and the second book in the series. Now, this last fantasy book I have is a more recent read. This book I actually found through TikTok. I started following this author and I just really enjoyed the description of his first book. So I've read the first 2 books in the series. There's 4 total, plus I believe 2 novellas, and that is the Luck Gods series. So the first one is Girl of Hearts, and this is a different magic system than we normally see. There's no fae, no dragons, there's demigods and some leprechauns and some other types of supernatural characters in here. And I really, really enjoyed it. It was a little bit of a different concept than what I normally read in my fantasy books. So the Luck God series, the demigods are based on the 4 card suits. So the hearts, the spades, the clubs, and the diamonds. And Aggie discovers the demigods when her mother is actually taken. And she basically has to find her mother and figure out what's going on. Her mother was working on a secret project that the Blackovers actually want to get their hands on, so they kidnap her mom. But this was definitely different. Think demigod mafia. That's how I described it when I first read it. You know, the 4 different suits are all 4 different mafia families. So Girl of Hearts by J. Gabriel Gates. Highly recommend. And I actually got this first book signed by him. So really, really enjoyable. And you can also follow him on Instagram and TikTok. The next book is a sci-fi book, and I'm not a huge sci-fi person, but I really, really enjoyed this one. Ready Player One takes place in the year 2044, and it's about Wade, who feels most comfortable in the virtual reality world called the Oasis. This book has Willy Wonka-esque vibes to it, because the creator of the Oasis starts leaving puzzles and clues that whoever can solve this and win the game will actually be left his fortune. And all you have to do is take part in them and unlock them. Unfortunately, some of them might be more dangerous. Some people might get so involved that they are willing to kill to get control of the Oasis. But I really, really enjoyed this. And what I enjoyed most about this is that the creator has an obsession with pop culture of the past. So in this book, there were so many pop culture references to 80s and 90s puzzles and games and things like that. So I really enjoyed this and I suggest it. Now, I didn't watch the movie, and I'm not sure if I'm going to, because I heard the movie was very different from the book, and I just enjoyed this book too much to have that ruined for me. So maybe one day I'll watch it, knowing that I have to keep it completely separate in my mind. But I'll let you know if I wind up watching that one day. Next up, I have some historical fiction recommendations that I just really, really enjoyed. And the first one is an author recommendation, not necessarily just a book recommendation. Although the books that I read, I'll put some of my favorites up here, I really, really enjoyed. So Kate Morton is a historical fiction writer that always has a twist in her books, which is really interesting. So The Secret Keeper, The House at Rivington, those are 2 of my favorites that she wrote. And I just recommend you read this if you like historical fiction with a little bit of a twist at the end. The next book I have, which I really, really enjoyed, is Water for Elephants. So this is a historical fiction that takes place during the Great Depression. So this is about Jacob, who is an aspiring vet, and he winds up hopping a train and getting a job with the circus during the Great Depression. And he's put in charge of feeding the animals and watering the elephants, right? Bringing the water for the elephants. And I just absolutely fell in love with this book. You know, he meets the lead of the Equestrian Act, and, you know, there's a whole story that goes along with that. And I don't want to ruin this because this was just a great book to read for the first time. So I definitely recommend, by Sarah Gruen, Water for Elephants. The next book is The Wishing Game. I enjoyed this so much. I mean, first of all, look at that cover. I was drawn in by the cover alone. And this is a contemporary fiction with, again, Willy Wonka vibes. This is like very Willy Wonka. So Lucy Hart wants nothing more than to adopt this little boy, Christopher, that she has this relationship with. Unfortunately, she doesn't have the economic means to do so. But there is this author, and these stories, Jack Masterson, that both her and Christopher really enjoyed, but he fell off the grid. He stopped writing, and then all of a sudden he comes out saying that he wrote this brand new book. It is the most sought out book, but he's not publishing it. He's actually going to offer it as a prize for this contest. So she enters in a chance to win this book, not because she wants to do anything with it, but she does it just purely for the fact that she and Christopher want this book because it's by their favorite author. And it was a little predictable, but it doesn't matter because this just drew me in. It was such a fast-paced read. I absolutely enjoyed The Wishing Game. The next two books are thrillers. Thrillers are not my go-to genre. I actually just really started getting into thrillers, and two thrillers that I read early on that kind of pulled me into the genre. They just really, I enjoyed them. They were fast reads and made me want to read more and more. So I would love your thriller recommendations down in the comments. The first one up is The Last Word by Taylor Adams. The beginning of this book creeped me out so much. I was reading this at night during a freak thunderstorm in my house, and I was just it was so creepy. And in the best ways though. But this is, about Emma, who is house sitting. So she's house sitting at this like secluded place, and the only human contact that she has is with the neighbor, who is definitely too far away to have any like normal contact with. And they have conversations through this whiteboard, through the windows, but they never actually like talk in person. And she writes this 1-star review for this book that she read. And she gets an email asking to remove the 1-star review and to change it. And she says no. And once she says no, weird things start happening, and the book just picks up so quickly. It's so engaging, and I just really enjoyed this. The next thriller that I have is The Family Game, and this was another book that was fast-paced. The trope in this book is, you know, rich, powerful family. So this woman, Harriet, she's a novelist, and she recently gets engaged to her very powerful fiance, Edward, and his family is kind of strange. When she goes to meet this family, she finds out that they enjoy these games, not like, you know, Monopoly games. Like they enjoy these really weird games. Like there's this game with during Christmas that they play, and it was just like it was very freaky, but it was a lot of fun to read this. But while she's there visiting the family, her future father-in-law slips her this tape, and as she listens to this tape, she realizes what she's listening to is information about a murder that she is basically tasked to figure out from her father-in-law. This was a little bit predictable, but it didn't matter because I enjoyed it so much. It just pulled me right in from the beginning. And this is, in my opinion, the thriller version of the Inheritance games, which I didn't pull, but I actually also really enjoyed the Inheritance games. So yeah, I'll put that up here too, just so you guys know. But I can't wait to continue that series as well. Last two books that I have are rom-coms. So again, these are more of author recommendations than just book recommendations, because I so far have not found anything by these two authors that I have not enjoyed. And the first one is Katherine Center, The Bodyguard. This was the first book that I read by her. so enjoyed this book that I picked up another book, and I have a whole list on my TBR of Katherine Center books that I want to read. So The Bodyguard is a fake dating trope where the bodyguard in this case is Hannah, and she is tasked with protecting this superstar who she has to get roped into this fake dating. He actually needs protection because of a stalker. I absolutely loved this book, and I also love the fact that Katherine Center pulls in like, you know, serious topics, but she does it in a way that is just so great. The banter in the books, the comedy in the books, I just absolutely loved this from beginning to end. The last book that I have for you by Abby Jimenez is Part of Your World. Again, I read this book, and then I read the second book in the companion series, Yours Truly, and I loved them both. This book pulled me in very quickly. I read through it in just a couple of days. Abby Jimenez is amazing. I love that she brings in mental health, similar to what Katherine Center does. And I love her author's notes because she also puts in her author's notes, you know, what parts of the book that she kind of uses her own life as inspiration for. So Part of Your World is about this big city doctor, Alexis, whose car breaks down in this small town, and she meets the mayor and the bed and breakfast manager, Daniel, and they have this secret romance. And she has to keep this romance pretty much hidden from her city friends and her family, because it just wouldn't be acceptable. You know, she has a very prominent family who is very important in the medical world. They own a hospital, and she's the legacy. She's supposed to be taking over. So, again, banter on point. The rom-com is great, and I just laughed out loud multiple times during this book. That's all I have for you today, and please put down in the comments any suggestions that you have for some of your favorite books, and let me know, have you read any of these books? Did you enjoy them as well? I'd love to hear them. So that's all I got for today. Bye for now.